To understand why this moment mattered so much, you need to understand who these 12 men were and what they'd lived through. By 2019, World War II veterans were disappearing at an alarming rate. It had been 74 years since the war ended. The youngest veterans who'd served were in their early 90s. The oldest were approaching 100. America was losing about 300 World War II veterans every single day. Heroes dying quietly in nursing homes, hospitals, and private residences across the country, taking with them first-hand memories of the most significant conflict in human history. In Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a nursing home called Oakwood Senior Living had become home to an unusually large group of World War II veterans. 12 men, all between the ages of 94 and 98, all with extraordinary stories of service, all now in the final chapter of their lives. There was Robert Chen, 98, who'd served in the Pacific Theater and survived the Battle of Okinawa. Frank Morrison, 97, who'd been part of the D-Day invasion at Normandy and fought his way across France. Thomas Jackson, 96, an African-American veteran who'd served in a segregated unit and still faced discrimination when he returned home. David Sullivan, 95, who'd been a medic and saved dozens of lives under fire. Each of the 12 men had similar stories, stories of courage, sacrifice, trauma, and survival. They'd been barely 20 years old when they went to war. Now they were ancient, their bodies failing, their memories of the war still sharp even as other memories faded. The men had become close friends at Oakwood. They shared a bond that only combat veterans truly understand, the knowledge of what it means to face death, to see friends killed, to carry memories that civilians can never fully comprehend. They played cards together, watched old war movies, and talked about their families and the lives they'd built after the war. In early 2019, the men learned that Metallica would be performing in Des Moines, about 2 hours from Cedar Rapids. One of them, Frank Morrison, had always been a Metallica fan. Even in his 90s, he loved the energy, the aggression, the raw power of the music. It reminded him of being young, of feeling invincible, of the intensity of life during wartime. Frank mentioned to the others that he wished he could see Metallica one more time before he died. The other men, even those who'd never been metal fans, understood what he meant. It wasn't really about the music. It was about feeling alive, about having one more adventure, one more experience before the end. The nursing home staff heard about the wish. They contacted the local VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, to see if there might be a way to make it happen. The VFW coordinator, a Vietnam veteran named Patricia Hayes, was moved by the request. 12 World War II veterans, all in their 90s, all dying, wanting one last adventure. Patricia reached out to Metallica's management. She explained the situation. 12 veterans, all terminally ill, all wanting to attend the concert. She asked if perhaps the band could set aside some accessible seating, maybe provide some assistance with logistics. The response came back within hours. They're not just coming to the show, they're our guests of honor. We'll handle everything. Metallica arranged for a medical transport bus, a vehicle equipped to handle wheelchairs and medical equipment. They hired nurses to accompany the veterans. They coordinated with Oakwood to ensure each man's specific medical needs would be met. They reserved 12 spaces directly in front of the stage, removed regular seating, and created a dedicated area for wheelchairs with perfect sightlines. On the day of the concert, the 12 veterans were dressed in their finest clothes. Some wore pieces of their old uniforms, caps, jackets, medals. They were excited but also exhausted. The preparation for the trip had taken a lot out of them. Several family members accompanied them, understanding this might be one of the last times they'd see their fathers or grandfathers doing something joyful. The medical bus ride took 2 hours. The nurses monitored vital signs, administered medications, kept the men comfortable. The veterans talked amongst themselves, reminiscing about the last time they'd been on a big adventure together, back when they were young soldiers heading into combat. When they arrived at the Wells Fargo Arena in Des Moines, Metallica's security team was waiting. The arena had been cleared early to allow the veterans to be wheeled in before the crowd arrived. The 12 wheelchairs were positioned in a special section right at the front, with perfect sightlines of the stage. Medical equipment was set up nearby. The nurses remained close, ready to assist if any of the men needed help. As the arena filled with 18,000 fans, people began noticing the 12 elderly men in wheelchairs at the front. Some concert-goers approached to thank them for their service. Others simply nodded respectfully from a distance. The veterans, despite their age and frailty, were energized by the atmosphere, the anticipation, the crowd, the sense of something significant about to happen. When Metallica took the stage, the arena erupted. The sound was overwhelming, the lights intense, the energy electric. For the first 30 minutes, the band played as they always did, hard, fast, aggressive. Songs like Master of Puppets and For Whom the Bell Tolls shook the arena. The 12 veterans were loving it. Despite hearing loss common at their age, despite physical frailty, they were alive in a way they hadn't been in years. Frank Morrison, who'd requested the concert, had tears streaming down his face, not from sadness, but from pure joy. About 40 minutes into the show, James Hetfield signaled to the band. The music stopped. The crowd quieted, confused about the sudden break. James walked to the front of the stage. He looked down at the 12 men in wheelchairs, then turned to address the crowd. "Before we continue," he said, his voice carrying through the arena's sound system, "I need everyone here to understand something. These 12 men in front of me are why we're all here tonight. Not because they're Metallica fans, though apparently some of them are, but because they're the reason we have the freedom to be here at all." He pointed to the veterans. "These men are World War II veterans. Let that sink in. World War II. That war ended 74 years ago. These men were barely 20 years old when they went off to fight. They stormed beaches. They fought in jungles and deserts and frozen forests. They liberated concentration camps and saw horrors that we can't imagine. They saved the world when they were younger than most of you in this audience." The arena was completely silent, 18,000 people listening to every word. "They're in their 90s now," James continued. "They're dying. Most of them won't be here next year. But before they go, they wanted to do one more thing. They wanted to come to a Metallica concert. They wanted to feel that energy, that life, one more time." James's voice was thick with emotion. "So here's what's going to happen. Everyone in this arena, I don't care if you're in the back row, I don't care if you're in the cheap seats, everyone is going to stand up right now, and we're going to honor these men. We're going to show them that we know what they did for us. We're going to show them that we remember." James raised his fist. "Stand up, now." 18,000 people rose to their feet. The applause started slowly, then built into a thunderous roar. It wasn't the usual concert applause, cheering and whistling and screaming. This was different. This was respectful, sustained, overwhelming applause. It was the sound of gratitude, of recognition, of an entire arena full of people acknowledging a debt that could never be repaid. James stood at the front of the stage, applauding along with everyone else. Lars, Kirk, and Robert joined him, all 4 band members facing the 12 veterans and clapping. The ovation continued. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Some people in the crowd started chanting "thank you." Others just kept clapping, tears streaming down their faces. The 12 veterans, sitting in their wheelchairs at the front, were overwhelmed. Robert Chen was openly weeping. Frank Morrison held his hand to his heart. Thomas Jackson, the African-American veteran who'd faced discrimination all his life, was surrounded by thousands of people honoring him without regard to race. David Sullivan, the medic, covered his face with his hands. 4 minutes, 5 minutes. The applause didn't stop.
Finally, James held up his hands to quiet the crowd. "Thank you," he said to the audience. "Thank you for remembering. Thank you for honoring these men." He turned to the veterans. "Gentlemen, this next song is for you. It's called Nothing Else Matters, and tonight, nothing else does." Metallica played the song more tenderly than they ever had before. It wasn't about power or aggression. It was about meaning, about connection, about what matters when everything else falls away. As James sang, he kept looking down at the 12 veterans, making sure they knew the performance was for them. When the song ended, the concert continued, but the energy had shifted. Everyone in that arena understood they'd just witnessed something more than entertainment. They'd participated in a collective national gratitude, a collective thank you to men who'd given everything and asked for nothing in return. After the concert ended, the 12 veterans were taken backstage. Metallica had arranged a private meeting, just the band, the veterans, and their families. For 2 hours they talked. The veterans told stories. James, Lars, Kirk, and Robert listened, asked questions, expressed their admiration and respect. The band members, who'd spent their careers being idolized by millions, were humbled in the presence of these elderly men who'd done things that actually mattered. Frank Morrison, the veteran who'd loved Metallica for years, got to sit with James and talk about music, about life, about the strange paths that had brought them both to that moment. Robert Chen, the Pacific Theater survivor, told Lars about the Battle of Okinawa, about fear, about courage, about watching friends die. Thomas Jackson talked with Kirk about discrimination, about fighting for a country that didn't always fight for him, about the slow progress of justice. The band signed items for each veteran, photographs, posters, pieces of memorabilia. But more importantly, they gave them time, attention, and genuine respect. For men who'd spent 75 years being quietly heroic without recognition, the acknowledgement meant everything. The medical bus took the 12 veterans back to Cedar Rapids late that night. They were exhausted but happy. Several of them said it was the best night they'd had in years, maybe in decades. Over the following months, the veterans' health continued to decline. Robert Chen died in October 2019, 4 months after the concert. Frank Morrison followed in December. By March 2020, 6 of the 12 were gone. The COVID-19 pandemic hit, making nursing home visits nearly impossible. The remaining veterans died in isolation, unable to see their families in person.
By February 2021, all 12 veterans who'd attended that Metallica concert were dead. But before they died, each of them talked about that night. Their families reported that the veterans referred to it as their last mission, their final adventure. Some of them asked to be buried with the items Metallica had signed for them. Others requested that photos from the concert be displayed at their funerals. Patricia Hayes, the VFW coordinator who'd arranged the initial contact with Metallica, attended many of the funerals. At each one, she told the story of the concert, how Metallica had stopped their show, how 18,000 people had stood and applauded, how the band had spent 2 hours with the men afterward. "Those men gave everything when they were young," Patricia said at one funeral. "They never asked for anything in return, but for one night they got to feel appreciated, honored, and valued. Metallica gave them that gift, and I think in some way it helped them make peace with leaving. They'd had one more adventure. They'd been recognized for what they'd done. They could go knowing that people remembered." The families of the 12 veterans stayed in contact with each other after their loved ones died. They formed a sort of extended family, bonded by the shared experience of that concert and by the loss of their fathers and grandfathers. In 2024, 5 years after the concert, the families organized a reunion. They gathered in Des Moines and visited the Wells Fargo Arena together. Standing in the space where their fathers had been honored, they shared stories and memories. Some of them had never heard the full details of what their fathers had done during the war, But they'd all heard about the Metallica concert, about the 5-minute ovation, about the private meeting afterward, about the joy on their fathers' faces. This story resonates because it touches something fundamental about respect, gratitude, and the passage of time. The men who saved the world in World War II were dying, disappearing into history. Their heroism was becoming abstract, something from history books rather than lived experience. But for one night, 12 of those heroes were made real again, not as historical figures, but as living, breathing men who'd done extraordinary things and deserved to be honored while they could still appreciate it. Metallica could have just sent tickets. They could have provided accessible seating and called it done. Instead, they created an experience that recognized not just what these men had done, but who they were. Elderly, frail, dying, but still deserving of dignity, respect, and one last adventure. The 5-minute standing ovation from 18,000 people wasn't just applause. It was a nation acknowledging a debt. It was a generation that had never known war, thanking the generation that had won one. It was young people recognizing that their freedom, their ability to attend rock concerts and live peaceful lives, had been bought with the youth and blood of men who were now ancient and dying. And perhaps most importantly, it was a reminder that heroism deserves recognition while heroes are still alive to receive it.